Hey, everybody. One of the things that we wanted to do as an English department as we start the new school year is review the writing process, especially when it comes to evaluating sources. And so this presentation is kind of a back to basics overview of some of that stuff. So here we go. So one of the questions that we ask sometimes is, what do you struggle with most when it comes to writing? And so one of them that we can look at is how to evaluate sources. So I would say, from my experience in looking at students and their choices of sources, it hasn't always been good. And part of that's on me, but also part of that is understanding which sources are legitimate and which ones are not. So let's start off with determining reliability and validity, or lack thereof, of your sources. Okay. So here's a funny cartoon. You could pause and look at it. All right. So areas of evaluation fall into this acronym OPVL. So origin, purpose, value, and limitation. Origin, purpose, value, and limitation. So where it comes from, what the author's purpose is, what value that purpose and what they say has, and then are there any limitations to what the article does. Now, so let's talk about origin. Origin is basically where it came from. So who created the source, when it was written or published, and where was the source produced, and then what type of document is it. All right. So let's go back. One of the things that I have done then is I pulled up this article for you, and we're going to kind of go back and forth to this. All right. So I got this from msnbc.com. So that's the source. Okay. Now, one of the other things we ask when looking at origin is when it's written. So when you're looking at this, obviously to find when it's written, since this is a news article, you go down and usually it's time stamped and dated. So this is from yesterday, okay, at nearly 4 a.m. Okay. Now, where was it produced? I would just say for this one, it's online because it's an online source. And then what type of document is it? Now, for this, you have to kind of do a little searching. I did this on purpose. I picked an opinion piece. So that's kind of our pushing off point here. I picked an opinion article on purpose, kind of to suit some of the questions later on. But you need to notice that should you pick something as a source that is an opinion, those don't always fit what you're trying to do. And so you have to delineate from fact and opinion and between sources, and able to, so you're able to decipher either one. Okay. So let's go back. Let's move on to purpose. So why was the source written? Who is the intended audience? What ideas or feelings was the author trying to express or evoke, and why? And is the perspective impartial, and how can you tell? So if I go back to my article that I chose, go back, okay? So again, I told you it's an opinion piece, but we also have to look at these questions. So why was this written? So let's just look at the title. Students heading back to college face a return to COVID-19 risk factors. Here's what to do. So why is it written? So it seems to me that this is written as an informational piece to older people as to how to treat college students as they go back to school. Okay? So that's what it was written. So who's the intended audience? It's not the kids. All right. So it seems like, just from the title, here's what to do. Okay. And if I go down, it's even the language she uses right here. We all know that students, like the rest of us, want to return to life as normal, which means seeing their friends and having full freedom of movement. So we know now that this is written for an older population. So somebody like me, or somebody that's older than me, who might be judging college kids as they go back to school. Okay. And so in reading this and in doing this, they'll be able to understand how they should be treating these students. Okay. Now, so the next question then is, what ideas or feelings is the author trying to express or evoke, and why? Okay. So the feelings that they're trying to get from you is really a sense of empathy. And they talk about this in the article. So it goes down, or she talks about that um, a little later on in the article. So parents should try to understand people. Most people have times in their past when they did things they aren't proud of or took risks. So that's evoking a sense of empathy. Like you've been there, you know what the students' feelings are, so you should understand what they're going through. Okay? Now, the most important question here is that an impartial stance? So in opinion pieces, you aren't partial or you aren't impartial. You're very partial to what your opinion is. And so this article then is not impartial because it's taking a stance, it's taking a side. If you have everyday news articles, for the most part, they should be impartial because they should just be giving you the story. Okay. Now, sometimes, depending on the news outlet, they don't do that, but for the most part, they should be. Okay. Let's move on to value. So, value is falls under these questions. So, does the text help you understand the topic? How is it useful to my topic or task? Are you able to verify the information in another source? And then, what, if any, valuable knowledge or evidence do you gain from this source? I would say that the article that I have pulled up has a lot of value. I actually do. So, the first question then, how does it help you understand the topic? She goes in depth very well into the science of how people's brains works, particularly young people like yourself, and why you're more apt to take risk. Okay. Now, how is it useful to my topic? That doesn't necessarily apply here, but just overall, the sources that you choose have to have value to what you are talking about. Okay. Now, are you able to verify the information in another source? So, could I take the information that's included here and verify what she's saying in another source? There's some of it in here that you could. She, like I said, she talks about a lot of science things. I mean, if you look right here, science type language is going on here. And so I can look that up, see if that's legitimate. It probably is. Okay. And so that holds some value. So she's doing that on purpose. It's to validate what she's saying. Last question. What, if any, valuable knowledge or evidence do you gain from the source? There's a lot to gain here. There's a lot to gain here. So by looking at this, you're trying to gain knowledge of how young people think, why they're doing what they're doing, and not necessarily abiding by all the guidelines that have been set up for us through this whole pandemic. And then what evidence do you gain from this? She gives a lot of examples from universities, particularly East Carolina University and others that opened up, and there were a ton of cases of COVID because the kids just went out and did their thing. So I would say overall, this article has tons of value. Okay, let's go back. So the next one then is limitation. So here's where things get kind of tricky. So there are limits to the value of your source for this one. So let's think of it from the perspective of the source that I picked. Why should you be careful trusting or using this source? I would be careful just simply because it's an opinion piece and I chose it on purpose. So you have to be careful with opinion because it's not always based in fact. So things that you write are opinion pieces and you back up your claims with evidence to try and fit your argument, right? So they're doing the same thing on this MSNBC article that I picked for you. Now, is there any bias? So are there any biases, religious, political, personal, etc., in your source? So this one, I would say no. I don't think there's any bias there. I would say that she is biased toward getting or allowing young people off the hook for their actions, but she backs that up with the science. Okay. Last thing, what does the text omit that's important to your research? So this is really a question for you when you're looking at sources. Like, did the text leave anything out that you really needed them to address?